Good day! Welcome to our learning episode in General Biology 1. This subject is specialized for students in grade 12, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics or STEM. But of course, everyone who is willing and interested to learn is also welcome to join us. Are you now ready to listen and learn? If yes, make sure you have your paper and pen with you so you can write what you've learned from this session. This is Teacher Boyet Gumapac Rulida of Bataan National High School, Integrated Senior High School, Bataan District, welcoming you all to another exciting, fun-filled learning of science concept through TV Eskwela. Have you ever wondered how we get energy from the food that we eat? Or how do plants make their own food? All of this can be completely answered after finishing all the topics in the second quarter of General Biology 1. And today, this is the beginning of our quest for answer to the questions that I've just mentioned. We will learn the first important concept that make us through the second quarter. But first, let us have a quick review on the topics that we have previously learned. When we were in elementary and junior high school, we were taught that the sun is the ultimate source of energy. The energy of the sun is captured by the plants or other autotrophs and is passed to another organism through the food chain. The energy contained in the food then will be utilized by organism to do different activities. Recall that in the first quarter, we learned that organisms are made up of cells which have different structures, types, function, and ways of reproducing and transport mechanism. Note that the cells need energy to continue their functions. But where do cells get energy? The answer is adenosine triphosphate or ATP. So today, we will have the following objectives. First, we will operationally define adenosine triphosphate or ATP and adenosine diphosphate or ADP. Second, we will compare and contrast ATP and ADP. Third, we will explain how energy from ATP is generated and used to fuel activities or reaction in the cell through the coupled reaction process. Lastly, we will explain the ATP-ADP cycle. And now, sit back, focus on the discussion, and take down notes, and let's begin. Adenosine triphosphate, also known as ATP, is a nucleotide that is considered to be the major energy source of the cell. It provides energy for most of the energy-consuming activities of the cell, and thus, it is also dubbed as the energy currency of the cell. Since it is a nucleotide, it is a molecule that is composed of nitrogenous base, sugar, and a phosphate group. On the other hand, adenosine diphosphate or ADP is also a nucleotide but is composed of adenine, ribose, and two phosphate groups only. However, they differ on the number of phosphate groups that they have. ATP has a 3-phosphate group while ADP has only 2. Let's look at the difference of the structure of ATP and ADP as shown. Now that we have an idea of what ATP is, let's try to know how organisms get energy from ATP. Students, this is how it happens. First, the food that is eaten by organism is digested to food molecules like carbohydrates, such as glucose and lipids. These food molecules are further broken down to produce ATP through the series or process called cellular respiration. This process, involved in cellular respiration, will be discussed and detailed in the next session. For now, what is important for us to know is that the food is broken down to produce ATP. Second, the ATPs are produced will react with water inside the cell in the process called hydrolysis. In this process, the phosphate bond between the second and the third phosphate group in ATP will be broken with the help of the enzyme ATPase. This breaking of bond in the phosphate group will cause a release of energy and produces adenosine diphosphate or ADP and one inorganic phosphate group. The hydrolysis of ATP is shown in the following reaction. Third, all the released energy from ATP will just be transformed into heat energy if not used directly by the cell. And so, the cell has a mechanism to use the released energy to fuel cellular activities such as moving molecules into and out of the cells. Protein conformation, breaking and forming chemical bonds, muscle cell contraction, and other tasks the cell needs to do. This mechanism of using or transfer energy from one chemical reaction to another. Note that the hydrolysis of ATP is an exorganic reaction or a reaction that releases energy. On the other hand, to activate a cellular activity is an inorganic reaction or a reaction that needs energy input. And so, using the released energy from hydrolysis of ATP as an energy input to fuel cellular activities is an example of coupled reaction processes as shown in the figure. Lastly, as the cell requires more energy, more ATPs are needed. The cell then regenerates ATP by adding inorganic phosphate group to ADP. This process of adding an inorganic phosphate group is called phosphorylation of ADP. In this reaction, energy is required to add an inorganic phosphate group to ADP, which will result to ATP. In hydrolysis, a bond is broken between two phosphate groups, while in the phosphorylation, a bond is formed between two phosphate groups. In terms of types of reaction, hydrolysis is exorganic. Thus, energy is released while phosphorylation is endorganic. Therefore, energy is absorbed. Then, the enzyme involved in hydrolysis is ATPase, while in phosphorylation, the enzyme is ATP synthase. Notice that the hydrolysis of ATP and phosphorylation of ADP forms a cyclic reaction. This cyclic reaction, where phosphate bonds are broken or formed and energy is released or stored, is called the ATP-ADP cycle. The ATP and ADP cycle is also a product of coupled reaction processes, the coupling of hydrolysis and phosphorylation. They are coupled reaction processes because some of the energy released from hydrolysis of ATP can be used to fuel phosphorylation of ADP as shown in the figure. And so, this is how cells of organisms make use of ATP as a source of energy. In summary, ATP is produced through cellular respiration from the food that organisms eat. ATP will then undergo hydrolysis to produce ADP and release energy. Energy that is released will be used to fuel cellular activities and regenerate ATP. To constantly supply the cell with energy, ADP will undergo phosphorylation to regenerate ATP through the coupled reaction processes. That sums up our discussion on how cells can derive energy from ATP and the role of ATP in energy coupling and transfer. Now, it's time to check your understanding on the things that we've discussed today through this 5-item multiple choice test. You will be given 5 seconds to choose the letter of the correct answer for each item. Are you ready? Let's begin. Question number 1. What does ATP stands for? Letter A, adenosine triphosphate. Letter B, adenine triple power. Letter C, adenosine triphosphorus. Letter D, adenine triphosphate. Time's up. The correct answer is letter A, adenosine triphosphate. Question number 2. Organism, like plants, that makes their own energy as referred to as letter A, autotrophs. Letter B, monotrophs. Letter C, homotrophs. Letter D, heterotrophs. Time's up. The correct answer is letter A, autotrophs. Question number 3. When is energy released from an ATP molecule? Letter A, when the bond between the adenine and glucose is formed. Letter B, when the bond between the adenine and a ribose is broken. Letter C, when the bond between the second and the third phosphate is broken. Letter D, when the bond between the first and the second phosphate is formed. Time's up. The correct answer is letter C, when the bond between the second and the third phosphate is broken. Question number 4. How can ADP can be transformed into ATP? Letter A, adding energy and a phosphate group. Letter B, adding energy and another ribose. Letter C, removing energy and a phosphate group. Letter D, removing adenine. Time's up. The correct answer is letter A, adding energy and a phosphate group. Question number 5. What are the parts of the ATP molecule? Letter A, adenine, thylakoids, stroma. Letter B, adenine, ribose, phosphate group. Letter C, stroma, grana, chlorophyll. Letter D, none of the above. Time's up. The correct answer is letter B, adenine, ribose, and phosphate group. Did you get it all correct, my dear learners? If yes, congratulations! If not, don't be discouraged because you still have the chance to watch this video again to better understand our lesson. To all the viewers, I hope that you've learned something today. Thank you for your cooperation and watching this episode. Again, this is Teacher Boyet Gumapac Rulida from New Bataan National High School, New Bataan District, saying, dito sa TV Eskwela, sa pag-aaral, sama-sama. Bye-bye!